welcome back. I've not cut my hair or anything, it's just in a low bun. Today's in a different kind of location. It's just because my room's getting like redecorated, so it looked a bit strange, so I wanted to just do it in a nice clear kind of background. I hope everyone is as safe as they can be right now during these times, and I hope your families are well. Today's video is going to be about the famous teacup poisoner. Now, I've included, he has a wax figure of him at Madame Tussauds. I'm not sure if it's even still up because that's a bit, I've never been to Madame Tussauds that has serial killers as wax, like people there, I don't know. So let me know if you've ever seen it, but I've included a photo of his wax figure. I had no idea that that photo was a wax figure until I clicked on the photo and it told me all about it, and I was like, what? I had no idea. So I want you guys to tell me if you know what photo it is and how you found out. Comment that down below. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and stay safe out there.
Who was Graham Young? He was born in North London on September 7, 1947 to Fred and Bessie Young. His mother died 3 months after his son's birth. His dad was so devastated by her death, the infant was put into care of his Aunt Winnie, whilst his older sister, Winfred, was taken in by her grandparents. The young Graham spent the first 2 years of his life with his aunt and her husband Jack, and became very close to them. When his father remarried in 1950, he reunited the family again in St. Albans with his new wife, Molly. Graham showed visible signs of distress after being separated from his aunt. He went on to become a very peculiar child and made no effort to socialize with others his own age. When he was old enough to read, he favored non-fiction accounts of murders and Dr. Crippen, the infamous poisoner. By the time he reached his teens, he had developed an unhealthy fascination with Adolf Hitler, and he took to wearing swastikas. He was also obsessed with witches and demons and their sacrificial ceremonies. He claimed knowledge of Wiccans and local covens, and tried to involve local children in bizarre ceremonies, which involved sacrificing numerous neighborhood cats. Academically, his only interests were chemistry, forensic science, and toxicology, but the limited school coverage of these subjects forced him to advance his studies through extracurricular reading. His father encouraged him and bought him a chemistry set. By the age of 13, Young's comprehensive knowledge of toxicology enabled him to convince local chemists that he was in fact 17 and obtain a dangerous quantity of poisons, digitalis, and arsenic for study purposes, as well as quantities of heavy metal, thallium. Keen to put his knowledge of poisons to the test, his first victim was fellow science pupil Christopher Williams, who suffered an extended period of vomiting, painful cramps, and headaches due to the careful mixture of Young and a cocktail of poisons that left medical experts baffled. They diagnosed Williams with just a severe migraine, as they could find no other cause. Williams was lucky to survive, probably because Young couldn't fully satisfy his scientific curiosity, as he wasn't able to monitor the illness of his victim whilst he was sick at home. This was not feasible, so he decided to focus on a group to whom he had unlimited access to: his own family. The family began to show intermittent signs of poisoning during the early part of 1961. Young's father initially suspected that Young might have been inadvertently harming the family because of the careless use of his chemistry set at home, but Young denied the accusation. The potential for deliberate poisoning was never considered, especially as Young had also been ill on numerous occasions. It remains unclear whether this was by design to avoid detection through scientific interest of his own reaction, or just carelessness of exactly which teacups he had poisoned. When Young's elder sister Winfred was found by doctors to have been poisoned by belladonna in November 1961, Young's father again suspected him but took no action. Molly Young, his stepmother, became the focus of Young's attention, gradually becoming more ill until April 21st, 1962, she was found by her husband in agony in the back garden of their home. The father noticed that Young was looking through the kitchen window whilst the dad was just getting home. The father says that Young just didn't know what to do as he was in shock. However, others believe he was looking on in fascination. She was rushed to the hospital where she died later that night. Her death was determined a prolapse of a spinal bone. She was cremated, and this was only because of Young's suggestion, as he didn't want to cause his father more grief. It was later discovered that she had developed a tolerance to antimony, which Young was slowly poisoning her with. And then he switched to thallium the night before her death to speed up the process. Even at his stepmom's funeral, he was poisoning people. Graham's uncle began vomiting after eating a mustard pickle sandwich spiked by his nephew. Following Molly's death, Fred Young's attacks of vomiting and cramping became more frequent and increasingly severe. He was also admitted to hospital, where he was diagnosed with antimony poisoning. He was very lucky to have survived his son's experimentation. So originally the doctors diagnosed Fred Young with arsenic poisoning. However, Graham Young responded to the doctors, "How ridiculous not being able to tell the difference between arsenic and antimony poisoning." I find it really strange how nobody picked up on this, but yeah, I just wanted to add it in. Fred Young still didn't believe it had anything to do with his son. However, they had no idea about the kid that was poisoned in his class. It was Young's chemistry teacher who had his own suspicions about him. He searched the boy's desk and found bottles of poisons, drawing of dying men, and essays about famous poisoners. He contacted the police, and Young was sent for what he believed to be a careers interview. However, the interviewer was actually a police psychiatrist. Young was bragging about his knowledge about different poisons and kept mentioning antimony and the difference in the side effects of the poisoning. At the family's house, the police were waiting there for him. They searched him and found 3 bottles of antimony on him. I don't know if it was like all the poison in his desk or on him, or they found overall, but it was enough to kill 300 people. Young was arrested on May 23rd, 1962. He boastfully admitted to poisoning his father, sister, and school friend Williams. However, no murder charges were brought against him for the murder of his stepmother, as any evidence had been destroyed at the time of her cremation. As he was only 14, he was committed to Broadmoor Maximum Security Hospital. He was the youngest inmate since 1885, and he served a period of 15 years. However, being locked up did not stop him. One of his inmates was a man named John Berridge. Graham wrote letters to his sister expressing irritation at his loud snoring. Within months of Young arriving at Broadmoor, John Berridge was dead of cyanide poisoning. Young was said to have extracted the poison from laurel bushes in the hospital yard, but his confession was not taken seriously, and Bridges' death was recorded as a suicide. On another occasion, staff and inmates' drinks and coffee were found to be tampered with. They also found a tea urn that could have caused a mass poisoning. However, nobody actually ever thought it was him because he hid his obsession so well. He was also allowed to work in the kitchen. The first psychiatrist that worked with him was like, "No, you can't allow him to come out." I'll play the video.
No doubt in my mind that this youth is at present a very serious danger to other people. His intense obsession and almost exclusive interest in drugs and their poisoning effects is not likely to change, and he could well repeat his cool, calm, calculating administration of these poisons at any time.
However, by the late 1960s, Young's doctors seemed oblivious that he actually did continue his fatal fascination and recommended in June 1970 that he'd be released as he had been cured. Young celebrated by informing the psychiatric nurses that he intended to kill 1 person for every year he had been in Broadmoor. The comment was recorded on his file, but amazingly never influenced the decision to release him. Young, now 23, was released on February 4th, 1971. He lived in a hostel, but had contact with his sister despite having been poisoned by him. She was more than forgiving. She was very concerned about his strong fixation with the crimes. He took great delight in visiting the scenes of his past crimes, thriving on reactions of the old neighbours when they recognized who he was. He made trips to London where he stocked up on antimony, thallium, and other poisons required for his experiments. And a fellow hostel resident 34-year-old Trevor Sparks, who was soon exhibiting familiar cramps and sickness once associated with Young, and another man who he had befriended, experienced such agony he took his own life. Although no connection to Young was established at this time. Young found work as a storeman at John Hadland Laboratories, which is a photographic supply firm in southern England. However, his new employers were aware of his Broadmoor stay. They said it was due to a mental breakdown. They had no idea of his history as a poisoner. If they knew this would have definitely impacted Young getting the job, as the easy availability of poisons such as thallium, which is routinely used in photographic processes. I'm going to play the video of his boss talking about how he had no knowledge and how it was a total cover-up of his history.
Medical certificate on Graham Frederick Young, which I'll read out from a. This man has suffered a deep-going personality disorder, which necessitated his hospitalisation throughout the whole of his adolescence. He has, however, made an extremely full recovery and is now entirely fit for discharge, his sole disability now being the need to catch up on his lost time.
Young's willingness to make tea and coffee for his co-workers raised no concern. Therefore, when Young's boss, 59-year-old Bob Eagle, began to experience cramps and dizziness, it was attributed to a virus or a local bug, which had inflicted a number of local school children. Other Hadland workers complained of similar cramps, but none were ever as severe as Eagle's, who curiously seemed to recover when off work ill, but instantly became sicker than ever on his return to work. He was eventually admitted to hospital where he died in agony on July 7th, 1971. His cause of death was recorded as pneumonia. In September 1971, 60-year-old Fred Biggs began to suffer similar symptoms to Eagle. The amount of people that had to stay off work increased dramatically, with employees suffering a variety of unusual ailments, including the usual cramp and hair loss. Various sources were considered, including water contamination, radioactive fallout, and leakage of the chemicals used at the firm itself, but there was no real progress made towards the cause. Biggs was eventually admitted to the London Hospital for Nervous Diseases, but took a long time to die, a cause of some frustration to Young, who recorded his displeasure in his diary. Fred Biggs passed away on November 19th in excruciating pain. This second death raised great concern with the firm. By this stage, about 70 employees had recorded similar symptoms, and there was fears of personal safety. The doctor on site tried to reassure staff by insisting that health and safety rules were being strictly adhered to, and was taken aback when Young challenged him in front of his colleagues, quizzing him on why thallium poisoning had not been considered as a cause, considering that it was used as a photographic process. The doctor was surprised at Young's in-depth toxicological knowledge and brought it to attention of management, who then alerted the police. Young's poison conviction was soon unearthed, along with his collection of poison on himself and in his home. Under interrogation, he admitted verbally to the poisonings, but refused to sign a written admission of guilt. Young did not realize the advances made in forensic science. Eagle and Biggs's body and ashes were exhumed and tested. It showed up positive for thallium poisoning. Even though they had direct evidence pointing at Young, there was no proper physical evidence linking him to poisoning these people. Also, as he was a minor that committed the last crimes, the jury was not allowed to know about his previous convictions and his stay at Broadmoor. So how is he going to get charged with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and 2 counts of administering poison? Young pleaded the not guilty and seemed pretty confident, as there was no physical evidence. However, the police found his diary that listed the chemists where he got the poison and also all of the victims and duration of their death and what they went through. Young said this was just because he was trying to write a fiction story. He was so happy about all the media hype around his trial. He loved the fact that he was, in his eyes, famous. Young did not like the nickname the Teacup Poisoner. He thought it belittling his skill and knowledge. He thought World Poisoner would be more appropriate. His manner was cool, calm, and arrogant, which did not win over the jury. He was found guilty on all charges on June 29, 1972, receiving 4 life sentences. This called for an immediate urgent review of the law regarding public sale of poisons. Also, an immediate review of the control, treatment, and assessment and release of mentally unstable prisoners. Young died in his cell on August 1st, 1990, aged 42. The official cause of death was heart failure, although many people and inmates think he poisoned himself in a final gesture of control. I'm going to tell you some interesting facts about this case. When he was asked if he felt any remorse, all he said was, "What I feel is emptiness of my soul." It was the first ever recorded case of intentional poisoning with thallium in Britain. It was also the first ever case that was able to find evidence through ashes. In prison, he befriended the Moor's murderer, Ian Brady. Also, the most scary part is, in November 2005, a 16-year-old Japanese schoolgirl was arrested for poisoning her mother with thallium. She claimed to be fascinated by Young, having seen the 1995 film, and kept an online blog similar to Young's diary, recording dosages and reactions of her mother.